When Billy Corgan finally spoke about D'arcy Wretzky, no one expected what he'd say. For years, fans of the Smashing Pumpkins thought the story was simple, a band torn apart by ego, control, and drugs. But Corgan's voice, calm and almost nostalgic, told a deeper truth. He said Darcy was more important than people realize. She had an energy that can't be replaced. It was a shocking admission from a man long accused of shutting others out. For decades, Billy was painted as the perfectionist dictator, the genius who couldn't share control. And Darcy, she became the ghost of the Pumpkins, past silent, misunderstood, and often blamed. But as Corgan's words spread online, fans started to look back. They remembered her haunting presence on stage, her thunderous bass lines, and her unshakable cool that balanced Billy's intensity. In that moment, the story wasn't about blame anymore, it was about recognition. The kind that comes too late. Billy seemed to carry a quiet guilt in his tone. He wasn't trying to rewrite history, he was trying to understand it. And for the first time, he admitted something most fans had always known. Without D'arcy Wretzky, the Smashing Pumpkins were never quite the same. Before the world knew the Smashing Pumpkins as one of the biggest rock bands of the 90s, they were just four kids in Chicago, hungry, uncertain, and full of dreams. Billy Corgan had the vision, but it was D'arcy Wretzky who gave that vision its cool, mysterious edge. They met by chance outside a Chicago club in 1988. Darcy overheard Billy criticizing a band and fired back with her own opinion. That bold exchange turned into a conversation and then into a musical connection. Billy needed a bassist, Darcy was ready for something real. When she joined, the sound of the Smashing Pumpkins began to take shape. Her deep, steady bass lines grounded Billy's complex guitar layers, while her icy on-stage presence gave the band a visual and emotional balance. James Iha's dreamy guitar style and Jimmy Chamberlin's explosive drumming completed the puzzle. Together, they created something that didn't sound like anyone else, heavy yet beautiful, aggressive yet emotional. By 1991, Gish put them on the map. They weren't just another alt-rock band, they were the sound of something new. But even as success came, Billy's drive became overwhelming. Rehearsals grew longer, tensions rose quietly. Through it all, Darcy stayed calm. She once said, "Billy's difficult, but he's brilliant, you just try to keep up." That loyalty would define her and also lead to heartbreak. When fans first saw D'arcy Wretzky on stage, they felt something they couldn't explain. She wasn't flashy or loud, but she was magnetic. While Billy poured out his emotions through wild intensity, Darcy balanced the chaos with quiet control. She didn't need to prove herself. She was the cool center in a storm of sound. Billy once said that Darcy had a presence that could still a room. And he was right. Her mysterious energy became part of what made the Pumpkins feel so different. In those early shows, when the lights went down and the distortion hit, Darcy's bass rumbled like thunder beneath Billy's soaring vocals. She was the heartbeat, steady, constant, reliable. Behind the scenes, she was tough but kind. The band was living on cheap food, traveling in vans, crashing on floors, and Darcy kept everyone grounded. She believed in the music, even when things got hard. Fans noticed that when she looked at Billy on stage, there was mutual respect, even affection. They understood each other, even when they didn't say much. That bond made their music feel personal, like it came from something deeper than just notes and lyrics. But as success came closer, the demands got heavier, and the same energy that once united them would soon start to tear them apart. At their peak, the chemistry between Billy, Darcy, James, and Jimmy was pure magic. Each member brought something essential. Billy's raw vision, James' melodic sense, Jimmy's power, and Darcy's grounding calm. Darcy was the quiet anchor. She rarely argued, rarely demanded attention, but she noticed everything. Her subtle input helped shape how songs felt. When recording Siamese Dream, Billy pushed everyone to exhaustion. He re-recorded parts, demanded perfection, and isolated himself in the studio. But even in that chaos, Darcy was there, tired, frustrated, but still loyal. Billy later admitted that he could be cruel without realizing it. "I was obsessed with making the perfect record," he said, "and I forgot we were human." For Darcy, it was hard. She loved the music but hated the pressure. Her quiet rebellion was simply enduring it, showing up every day, doing her part. When Siamese Dream exploded in 1993, the world saw them as untouchable. But inside, the cracks were deep. Still, the connection between Billy and Darcy remained complicated, a mix of admiration, frustration, and something unspoken. She once said, "Billy could drive you crazy, but you couldn't deny his talent." Their bond had built the Smashing Pumpkins, but fame was about to test everything they stood for. By 1995, the Smashing Pumpkins were on top of the world. Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness had become a cultural landmark, two discs of brilliance that captured everything the band stood for. But behind the success, the pressure was unbearable. Endless tour, personal struggles, and Billy's perfectionism made life inside the Pumpkins feel like a storm. Darcy began to feel invisible. She loved the music but hated being treated like a background player. Billy's control in the studio was absolute. He recorded most of the parts himself, leaving little room for others. For someone like Darcy, who had been there from the start, that hurt. She wasn't just a bassist, she was part of the soul of the band. The press, meanwhile, started painting her as moody or detached, but her silence was just exhaustion. Even Billy now admits, "We were all falling apart, but I didn't see it then." Fame magnified every flaw. The more they succeeded, the more isolated they became from each other. Still on stage, they remained unstoppable. Darcy's presence was icy calm, her playing locked in. To the audience, she was the picture of strength. But inside, she was fading, slowly losing herself to the machine of success. And soon, that quiet storm would erupt. Billy and Darcy's relationship was built on creative chemistry, but over time, that chemistry turned volatile. Billy's relentless control clashed with Darcy's quiet independence. She wasn't confrontational, but she wasn't afraid to call him out. In interviews, she'd say things like, "Billy thinks he's the only genius here." Billy in turn saw her as distant or unreliable. It wasn't hatred, it was misunderstanding. They both cared too much about the music but showed it in opposite ways. The more Billy took over creative control, the more Darcy drifted away emotionally. Rehearsals turned cold, communication broke down, and in the middle of touring chaos, they both started to lose sight of why they'd begun this journey. Years later, Billy admitted, "Darcy was hard to read. I didn't know what she needed, and I probably didn't care enough to ask." That honesty came decades too late. At the time, the silence between them was deafening, the sound of two people who used to understand each other perfectly, now strangers sharing a stage. And as the Pumpkins' world grew darker, Darcy began to disappear from it entirely. During Siamese Dream, Billy's perfectionism reached its peak. He recorded nearly every guitar and bass part himself, often without telling the others. For most musicians, that would have been the breaking point. But Darcy didn't explode, she endured. She stayed focused on the music even when it meant swallowing her pride. Behind the scenes, she supported her bandmates emotionally. When James Iha and Billy clashed, Darcy tried to cool things down. When Jimmy struggled with addiction, she offered quiet compassion. She was the glue, the one holding the emotional chaos together, even when no one noticed. Years later, Billy reflected, "I didn't realize how much Darcy kept us from falling apart." Her strength wasn't loud, it was steady, invisible, and real. She didn't demand recognition, she just wanted respect. When the album finally came out and became a masterpiece, she didn't bask in the glory. She stood at the edge of the stage, playing her bass with that same mysterious calm. But that calm was starting to crack. Because in a band driven by one man's vision, it's easy to feel like you've disappeared. Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness wasn't just an album, it was a universe. Billy called it his masterpiece. But for Darcy, it was the hardest period of her life. The sessions were endless. Billy demanded perfection from everyone and mostly from himself. The atmosphere in the studio was intense, often hostile. Darcy later said, "We weren't a band anymore, we were just parts of Billy's machine." Despite that, her presence remained vital. The contrast between Billy's chaos and Darcy's calm gave the music its emotional balance. Songs like 33, Tonight Tonight, and 1979 carried that fragile tension beauty built from pressure. But emotionally, the band was breaking. Darcy was struggling with exhaustion, self-doubt, and feeling unheard. Billy was drowning in his own ambition. Still, every night on tour, Darcy stood tall. Fans loved her, the quiet strength, the mystery, the beauty. She represented something pure about the Smashing Pumpkins, the human side of their dream. But dreams come at a cost, and soon hers would come crashing down. After years of constant touring and recording, Darcy's spirit began to fade. She was tired not just physically but emotionally. The pressures of fame, the lack of communication, and the loss of identity all began to weigh on her. She once said that she joined the band to make art, but now it felt like survival. As the late 90s came, Darcy started pulling away. She missed rehearsals. Rumors spread about substance struggles. Billy grew impatient, and instead of helping, he distanced himself further. The once close friendship between them turned cold. Darcy felt betrayed. She stood by Billy through everything, through his ambition, his moods, his demands. And now, when she needed understanding, she found none. By 1999, during the Machina sessions, she was barely there, and soon she was gone entirely. In interviews years later, Darcy's pain was still clear. "They replaced me like I was nothing," she said. But fans knew the truth: she was something that could never be replaced. Billy Corgan has often been described as both a genius and a tyrant. In the Pumpkins' world, he was the sun, everything revolved around him, and that kind of gravity can crush the people closest to you. For Darcy, it became unbearable. She respected Billy's talent but hated his control. Every creative choice, every tour, every sound had to pass through him. She started to question her place in the band she helped build. Her ideas were brushed aside, her input was minimized. She was no longer part of the vision, she was just there to play along. In private, she confided to friends that she felt erased. Billy, however, didn't see it that way. He thought he was protecting the music. Years later, he would admit, "I didn't realize how much I hurt Darcy. I thought I was doing what I had to do, but I forgot about the people who helped me get there." That admission came decades too late, but it revealed what had always been true: genius without empathy destroys everything around it. When RCY officially left the Smashing Pumpkins in 1999, the band's foundation cracked completely. Billy continued, but fans noticed something essential was missing. The press spun the story as just another rock and roll breakup. But to Darcy, it was deeper. She wasn't just leaving a band, she was leaving a family that had stopped recognizing her. Billy tried to move on, but in interviews, he couldn't hide the tension. He said things like, "We couldn't work with her anymore," while Darcy fired back, calling him controlling and manipulative. It was heartbreaking: two people who had built something beautiful, now tearing it down publicly. The world picked sides. But underneath the noise there was sadness. Because even in anger, both of them knew they'd created something together that would never happen again. Years later, Billy admitted, "It was a loss I didn't process for a long time." That honesty showed what fans had always suspected, that behind his pride, Billy Corgan missed Darcy more than he'd ever say out loud. For almost 2 decades, Darcy and Billy didn't speak. The silence between them became one of rock's longest-running feuds. Billy rebuilt the Pumpkins with new lineups. Darcy disappeared from the public eye, living a quiet life in Michigan. Fans kept asking, would they ever reconcile? Whenever Billy mentioned her, it was complicated, sometimes kind, sometimes defensive. Darcy, on the other hand, described him as a narcissist who couldn't share credit. Their bitterness became legendary. But time changes people. By the late 2010s, Billy had softened. He'd become a father, a label owner, a survivor of fame. In interviews, he began to reflect differently. He stopped blaming and started remembering. He said Darcy brought something that was beyond playing. She gave the band attitude, style, presence. We lost that when she left. It was the first crack in decades of silence, a hint that healing might still be possible. When rumors of a Smashing Pumpkins reunion surfaced in 2018, fans were thrilled but cautious. Everyone asked the same question: would Darcy return? For a brief moment, it looked possible. Billy reached out, Darcy responded, old wounds seemed ready to heal. But then, everything fell apart again. Darcy claimed Billy misled her, that the invitation wasn't genuine, that he only wanted her for a few shows. Billy denied it, saying she wasn't emotionally ready to return. The reunion went ahead without hers. And for many fans, it didn't feel right. The chemistry was gone, the story unfinished. Darcy stayed quiet for a while, then spoke with sadness. It could have been beautiful, but it's just not meant to be. Even Billy admitted that the situation hurt. I tried, he said, but maybe some things can't go back to what they were. Still, he spoke of her with more kindness than ever before, a sign that maybe, finally, he understood what she'd meant to the band's soul. Years later, when Billy reflected on the Smashing Pumpkins' legacy, he didn't talk about chart positions or awards, he talked about people. Especially Darcy. In a rare, emotional interview, he said, I didn't appreciate her enough. Darcy was the heart of the band in ways I didn't see. She made us feel real. It was an admission that shocked longtime fans. After decades of silence and bitterness, Billy finally recognized what she brought: the rawness, the mystery, the humanity that balanced his intensity. He explained that Darcy's spirit represented the truth behind the music, that without her, the Smashing Pumpkins lost part of their emotional core. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was something deeper, a realization. The kind that comes when you've lost too much and finally see what mattered all along. For Billy, it wasn't about fixing the past anymore. It was about honoring it. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Billy Corgan and D'arcy Wretzky may never share a stage again, but their story has become something more than a feud. It's a lesson in art, ego, and forgiveness. Darcy's absence reminds us how vital she was not just as a bassist, but as a soul. She gave the Smashing Pumpkins their balance, their emotion, their humanity. Billy's later words, filled with regret and respect, showed how much she truly meant to him, even if he realized it too late. He admitted that what they created together could never be recreated. Fans still dream of